Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Nate Turner. Nate Turner has a background that many of us would envy. He was a part of Sprout Social, grew it from 0 to 100 million revenue, and then it was sold as an IPO. And he is today co-founder of 10 Speed, which is a tech-enabled content optimization company. So he has incredible experience in looking at A, how do you grow a company? And two, what are the pieces that you need to really think about to make that happen? So Nate, before we get too far into the discussion, I'm going to let you add to that introduction of yourself. Tell us and our audience what is important that I haven't said that you would like them to know.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. As you mentioned, I was at Sprout Social. I was able to join as the first marketer pretty early on in the company's history. And that was early 2011. And so I spent almost 9 years there and had the opportunity to be a part of essentially leading and growing the inbound marketing, which was a big driver for company growth. And so just had the opportunity to experience a lot of different stages of growth within one company, not having to jump around to different startups or different companies. And so ton of invaluable lessons that come from that, and just experiencing the different stages of growth and all that comes with that. And so, yes, as you mentioned, they were able to IPO last year. And last year I left Sprout Social, and it just kind of had reached a point where I was ready to do some different things and move on, and also have some more flexibility for myself and my family. And so moved into consulting with mostly SaaS companies at that time. And so got to work with some great companies and doing a lot of essentially like fractional head of marketing or fractional head of growth type of role. And working with them to kind of help either kickstart growth or continue scaling growth. Worked at a couple different stages, and that was great. Just getting to kind of be a part of different companies and see how they work, and also kind of help get them to where they're trying to go. And through that, and through my time at Sprout, like content and SEO were obviously big parts of what we're doing from an organic search perspective, and really growing those channels. And that's something that was working really well with clients, and just something that is passionate. I'm passionate about, and my co-founder is passionate about. So that's where our new company 10 Speed came from, which was just really finding a way to take what we know from all the experience of growing and scaling content and SEO practices, and putting that into a service that we can work with companies. So yeah, it's been Sprout was a great opportunity. Consulting gave a lot of different perspectives, over the last year and a half, and now getting to do 10 Speed as well is been a great mix of experience.
So if you would just clarify for a moment, the
Sure.
growth that Sprout Social experienced from 0 to 100 million was over about a 10-year period?
Yeah,
Okay.
little under that. Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So that's very, very rapid growth, and
Yeah.
wonderful to hear about. So tell me a little bit about your company, and what is content optimization?
Yeah, so 10 Speed is a company that really layers in primarily with companies that have some sort of content function already in place. And so we are essentially layering in the deep expertise on SEO and a lot of the research behind that, so we can essentially identify places where your content was performing well and has sort of declined over time, as well as places where the content is doing okay but could be doing better. And we package those insights sort of at a URL level each month for companies to be able to see, here's what you should be changing, here's how you should structure the content, and a number of other insights that we provide, so they can write or modify content to meet that and improve their organic traffic and conversions.
So when you look at companies doing content and you're helping them with content optimization, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see companies making?
I would say, one of the things um, that it may not feel like it within the company in particular, but um, inconsistency, or really even just like no strategy. I think it's quite common that uh, companies get started and or either at the beginning or at some point decide we need to have a blog, we need to get writing, and it just starts as like this: somebody's got to write something, whoever has an idea, and it sort of just kind of continues down that path, and maybe you start to bring in more freelancers and stuff, but there's not necessarily a holistic content strategy and blog strategy there. And so I think that's one is really be able to have that plan and that strategy. I would say, I've sorry, go ahead.
Can I just ask you relative to that, when you talk about a
Sure.
blog and content strategy, what are you really talking about? Because I think what you most people do or what you just was the former of what you said. So tell us a
Sure.
little bit
Yeah.
about what a strategy would involve.
Yeah. I think at a high level, there's certainly some of the keyword research from an SEO standpoint. So understanding, where some of those topics that they should be writing on that have good relevant search traffic. And um, so that's one, but I really think it's understanding who your audience is, what their pay points are, some of the points along the buyer's journey in the funnel, and understanding what you need so that I guess an example would be, instead of um, writing a blog post on a topic and then 6 months later doing a webinar on that topic, and then 3 months after that, sales staff asking for collateral on that topic. Being more forward looking, and maybe creating content across a number of channels on one topic at one time. So like be making better use of your time and your energy there. But I think, yeah, it's really understanding your audience, what you want to be writing about, what's relevant, kind of what's needed along the buying path. Those are kind of some of the big areas there, and then really just planning out. Is it which formats? Is it blogs that are best? Is it a ebook guide? Is it a webinar? Some of things like that, and then some of those things also then can sort of spiral into, or maybe not spiral, but feed into being able to look ahead at your plan and say, this is something we should actually bring in this expert from the outside to contribute and be on this webinar with us. And you can, have time to coordinate and make things better, or just better production quality, things like that. So I think, just largely planning ahead, but also being thoughtful of the audience and buyer journey as well.
So I interrupted you on the mistakes. If
Oh,
you would
sure.
continue.
Yeah. Well, I think, the other big one is sort of related, or two big ones that are related, is like, I see a lot of companies that just sort of give up too early, I would say.
Oh,
And I think that a lot of times that has to do with the other problem, which is measuring, sort of incorrectly measuring the result of content, only by sort of the bottom of funnel results. And so obviously it's great to measure your content with how much revenue it generates, if you can do that. But that's not the sole function of content. There's a ton of awareness benefits that come from that, and reach, and brand building, and trust building, and education, and a number of things that happen for your audience, through your content, that aren't necessarily measured directly in leads or sales or revenue. And so I think that's something that I've seen far too often. Is we tried it, it didn't have a good enough ROI, so we stopped. And that's not necessarily giving content the full benefit of all the impact that it can have on your marketing.
so Nate, how do you balance that need for an ROI with knowing that, in a sense, content optimization is a longer term strategy, right? You're looking for the long term in terms of really growth for the business. So how do you balance that?
Yeah. I mean, it's something I certainly dealt with for a long time at Sprout, and over the years, it's sort of how you manage your short-term goals with sort of the long-term investments, and have encountered that certainly with a number of clients as well. Um, I think that it's like SEO and content are similar in that I think they, at some level, just require a commitment from leadership that this is something we want to do. This is something we want to be part of our company and marketing DNA, and it's not necessarily a short-term view. So I think when you have alignment there from company leadership, then I think that's an important aspect. But I do think that it is it's almost like not an answer, but it is sort of just a balance of we're doing these content things because we know they'll sort of pay off in the long term, but we're also making sure we're investing in either shorter term partnerships or paid campaigns or things like that that can make sure we're actually bringing in what we need to grow the business. So I guess it's sort of that it is a balance, but um, it just it depends. I guess beyond that, like it depends on kind of where you're looking to invest and how much and some of the more specifics that would probably be required in terms of what the trade-offs are and when to do it one versus the other, things like that.
So along those lines, what are some of the things that companies can do or that they're overlooking in their process of content optimization?
Sure. Um, well, I think there's a couple easy ones. Um, I think for a little while there was a pattern of companies just changing the date on the published date on the post. So taking an old blog post that's maybe from a few years ago, change the published date to today and republish it. Um, and that did have some decent results for a while. I think that's sort of um, phased out quite a bit. But I think that's something that I've seen is that there's still companies that's sort of their plan. I think um, there's not enough focus on like the search intent. I think it was a really big aspect of that. So really understanding the why behind what someone is searching. So it's not just a keyword, and especially not in your research. It's not tons of keywords in a spreadsheet. Every one of those keywords represents a group of people each month that are actually trying to accomplish something. And what is it that they're trying to accomplish? And so being able to understand, is it research based? Is it, more transactional based? And then even further, the nuances of kind of what are all of the things that they're wanting to see in your content to sort of satisfy that searcher intent. So I think going a few levels deeper there to understand that. And then lastly, I would say um, maybe it gets a little bit more back to like some of the older, more SEO basics of, H2s and H3s and your title tags and image alt tags and elements like that are more on page. But a lot of that really can have a pretty big impact on as the search engine crawls your site, the way that they're um, sort of perceiving the hierarchy of the content, and knowing how to sort of structure that content and process it. Having the right structure and tagging on your page can have a big impact on how that's perceived and then ultimately ranked as well. So I would say those are a few of the things that when companies are refreshing, it's just um, not quite doing all of what they could be to capture that opportunity.
So part of my sense is that you can refresh, but the world is also changing at a rapid rate. And so what
Mhm.
you may have done once, especially with your H23, that changes in terms of where
Yes.
those hot buttons are. So it's there's a lot of attention to the change, the new trends that becomes
Yes.
really critical. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think you're spot on. And there's a couple elements to that. Um, there's the change that's happening with sort of the external competition. You have other competitors that are coming in and writing content on similar topics or
Right.
things like that. And so, in highly competitive searches, there are cases where you and your competitors are kind of running the same playbook, and so it just so happens that you have hundreds or thousands of posts, so you're focused in some, and there are others, and you're kind of taking back and forth. But if you're not actually going through that process of continuously optimizing your content, then competitors may just be continuously eating away at your position. And so there are some of those more competitive terms where you actually need to be sort of going through that process of re-optimizing your content as frequently as every month,
Oh,
to
wow.
really stay on top of it.
Mhm.
It could be, I think it's more typical that you're probably looking like maybe 4 to 8 months, on the average, and some are maybe once a year. But it's definitely, when you think about it at scale, and for anyone that has even just a few hundred blog posts, like it's definitely a big factor in how you're making sure that as you're building new content to try to capture more traffic, your existing content isn't sort of eroding under the surface and working against you. But the other aspect you mentioned in terms of needing to do that frequently and things changing is, it's a little bit more of a less obvious thing, I guess. But as companies are continuing to create their own content and their sites just naturally get bigger with the more that they do,
Okay.
there are situations where you can also have a number of pages on your site that are sort of hitting on or near some of the same topics and can be kind of ranking or competing with itself for the same terms. So you kind of get that internal competition as well. And so that's another area that we're typically looking at is, what kind of internal competition do we have? And is there an opportunity to actually consolidate multiple pages into one and help that one to perform better instead of competing against yourself? So that can kind of be um, a natural cause of growth. Is just that sort of starts to happen over time.
So before I leave looking at this and some of the other aspects, I want to ask you, what kind of companies come to you to get help with this? How big are they? Where are they in that growth trajectory to really be able to utilize services like yours?
Yeah. Yeah, but I would say like the the types of companies, so we work with a decent amount of like SaaS and technology companies, as well as a little bit in like e-commerce and D2C realm. And then there's also some agencies and like consulting firms that are publishing quite a bit of content, and organic traffic is important. So that's really the one of the biggest common threads across the type of company, is that it's a company that values and depends on organic traffic as an important channel for new leads or new customers. And we're typically working with folks that have at least one or two freelance writers, or maybe a writer in house, some sort of content process and infrastructure that we're able to kind of layer in and add our expertise to, versus like from complete scratch. We're not doing any content. I think that's typically a little bit harder
Right.
for us to work there. But when that's so I would say it's like early to mid stage growth companies. When you get into really big companies, then that are doing like a lot of content, they typically are going to have a little bit more of the expertise that we're providing. It's more common for that to be in house because they're at a size where they can afford to hire those skill sets.
So what are the challenges the company would be feeling that would cause them to say, wow, I've got to call Nate Turner at 10
Sure.
speed to help me solve this problem?
Yeah. I think the most obvious one is that your organic traffic is just declining, month over month, just not growing, and actually, and it is declining, being just sort of hitting a plateau or being flat over a stretch of time is typically another one that's so really it's a company feeling organic as a channel used to be growing for us and now it's not, and it's either flat or actually getting worse. So that would probably be a big driver for looking for that. And then the other is just um, a company that knows they're creating a good amount of content. They're committed to sort of this path and wanting to be a big channel for them in the future, and want to just work with a team to make sure they're optimized and doing it as well as they could be. So that'd probably be the two main areas.
So for companies, where are their biggest opportunities relative to content marketing?
In terms of like what they could biggest opportunity for them to grow.
Yeah, grow, especially in their inbound marketing and inbound traffic.
Yeah. So I think the blog content is obviously the one that I think would come to mind first for most people. Like we need to create blog content to be um, to rank and drive organic traffic. But I do think that um, the I think webinars are tough now. Like this year, I think just with all of the pandemic and shifting to remote work and no live events, that's sort of heavily saturated that channel. But in a bigger picture, when zooming out, I think webinars and a lot of just co-marketing in general. So doing things that are you partnering up with another company, sort of similar, that you both sort of share the same audience, doing things together, I think are fantastic for both sort of creating awareness, but also generating leads and opportunities there. Um, I think those are big. And I think just in general, whether you would choose to do it through video or a podcast or lengthy researched guides, I think that a lot of companies tend to be sitting on a good amount of data and insights for their industry that they're not really understanding and leveraging in a way that they could be, to be able to. I mean, not everyone needs to create like a state of the whatever report each year, but things along those lines that I think are just really tapping into the collective insight and knowledge that your company has, to be sharing that and building that. So again, that probably has a certain level of awareness building. It's not necessarily do this and it turns into a certain number of leads directly, but it is building your audience, building awareness, and all contributing towards inbound growth.
So when you look at that, what are some of the belief systems that people have about content marketing that just aren't true or that hold them back from being effective?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's, especially in terms of SEO, I think typically the feeling that anything that's done will take 9 to 12 months for it to pay off. I mean, I've definitely heard that a lot in the last year and a half, that we can't focus on SEO right now because it'll take a year. And that certainly can be true, but there's also many circumstances where it's not, and there are opportunities for very new or incumbent, new companies to come in and really challenge who's there and rank and do well in a short period of time, when they're focused in the right areas. And there's also especially in the optimization of existing content that we're focused on, it's typically content that's already being actively crawled by the search engines. They already have backlinks and a lot of authority established. where changes can be substantially like the improvement is substantial in a period of as short as 30 days. Um, so I would say that's one that we definitely see a fair amount. And the other is I think that there's a, a feeling that there's sort of a magical number, and it probably most often comes from, ironically, reading a blog post about how much you should be blogging. And so I think that's another thing I've heard just from conversations over time is, well, we're publishing for, once a week, or, 4 times a month, or whatever this number might be. Why isn't it working? And I think that's there isn't necessarily a set number of posts. There's a lot of other factors that would go into the space you're in and the competition, and how much the competition is growing, and a number of things to really understand, like, if it's highly competitive, and a number of other factors, you potentially would need to be doing, orders of magnitude more content publishing and optimizing each month, to be able to see substantial growth. So definitely not like a one size fits all number of posts to write each month, or one size fits all length of each blog post in terms of word count, would be the other one that I see quite a bit.
I love your comment about co-marketing, collaborating with other companies. And I think that is one of the things that all of us could do a whole lot more of. I know from a personal standpoint, I think about that and I go, yes, that's another set of time and energy to develop. And
Yes. Yeah.
And yet you think, you talk with people regularly, and it's probably easier to do than we think. And I spoke with, during COVID, a gentleman who was doing a lot of work with M&As, and his comment was that he felt that the new capital coming out of COVID would be collaboration. We would have to use resources more wisely. And so I think it's something we're going to be challenged to do, and to learn how to do and do it well.
Yeah. And I think it's on the sort of the capitalistic perspective, you could look at it and say, I want to do co-marketing with this company because we're going to get access to their audience, and they have this huge audience, and it's going to be good for our business. And the flip side is, I think maybe the lesser seen benefit is that not only are you working with someone to gain awareness and exposure to their audience, but you're also in sort of curating more points of view and more expertise for your own audience, it's very similar to what you do with the podcast. But if you were to do that with, say, writing guides or ebooks once a quarter, and always doing it alongside another company, you're helping your audience to get this curated perspective that varies, and just get a lot of different inputs and whatnot. So I think there's definitely benefits there too, in terms of your own existing audience, your own customer base, things like that.
Nate, our time is almost up. Things we have missed that you think are really important for us to cover, things that we left kind of unfinished that you would like to make sure the audience is clear about?
I think we definitely covered a lot. It was great. And I think the one thing I would just add is certainly the world of SEO and even content marketing more broadly is definitely a rapidly evolving one, and a lot of different things happening. And so that's something that I think would just encourage anyone to see and accept as a thing that's always changing, always opportunity for improvement, not something that we just kind of do once a year or once every couple of years and then let it be. It's definitely something that should be watched closely, especially if you're in a competitive space.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who are listening, we will have information about Nate and his company 10 Speed in the show notes, so you can get in contact with him. I think, Nate, just before we close, One of the things that I'm hearing from so many people is the overwhelm or the stress about just how do we keep up with how rapidly this world of digital marketing changes and shifts. And
Mhm.
so I think having a resource like Nate for all of you is really important. And I just appreciate your input and your comments because I think it will be a great help to many people. So thank you, Nate.
Sure. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
And thank you all for listening to Building My Legacy podcast. Be sure to visit us at buildtomorrow.com, our website, and all of our social media sites as well, which are buildtomorrow.com. Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell button above. Leave comments. We'd love to hear what you think. And visit our other social media links as well. Thanks much.